No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Talking on it though, then
He a
you're gonna
legend.
it up later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
Pico money, Pico money, Pico money. We making Pico money. Payday, about to throw a rack on China. Need some DFS advice, where can I find some? League of Items got the sheet with all the lineups and all the stats that you need to get to diamond. League of Items!
Getting gold, that's the goal. Keep on winning on a roll. Kill 4 dragons, got soul. Now you got nowhere to go. Teleporting top to bot. Dive your carry on the spot. That's an ace. Wreck your base. Wear my crown. We on top.
It's the league, it's the league, it's the league, it's the league, it's the league of items.
League of Items!
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Legend, legend, legend,
legend,
legend, legend.
legend.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video, we are going to make a global tier list. I've already made the global tier list. I'm going to share it with you today. So we're going to talk about all of the teams in the LCS, the LEC, the LCK, and the LPL. This is going to be a global tier list that tries to put everybody into the same tier list. Obviously, there's differences in regional strength, and we'll get into that at a later point in time. We're going to talk about the odds for each of these teams to win their own region, and those numbers are going to come from sports books in general, because, you know, if you have a strong opinion on this, you can go and bet on it. I bet, and a lot of the people that watch these videos make bets on things, and that's why, you know, I make this content, is for people to hear what I think about these teams, and they use that information however they wish. So before we get into talking about a specific team, let's talk about the tier list itself and what the different tiers mean. This will be a ranking from 47 to 1, but I will also talk about the tiers as well. So in the F tier, these teams have no future. They have no chance to do anything, and their plan just doesn't make any sense. I don't know if there is an F team right now. There are some teams that I would consider that their lowest range, the lowest outcome they could possibly have would be that they have no future, but I'm not going to use that at this point in time. Then we have D teams who are, you know, in the best case scenario, they'll be a mid-level domestic team, so they'll be competing for a playoff spot or something like that. Then you have the C tier teams who are competitive domestically, so maybe they make the playoffs, maybe they win a round in the playoffs, but they never really threatened winning the title. In the B tier, you have the domestic winners, and if you're a domestic winner, you will qualify for an international tournament, so I throw that into the B tier. And these are a lot of the teams that people consider to be good teams. I don't think of them that way. I think, you know, just because you make it to Worlds, and a lot of the time, even though you made it to the knockout round, it doesn't mean that you're a serious competitor. Like, could you maybe win a knockout round? Yes, but do you have a chance to win the tournament? Like, if everything breaks your way, probably not. Then we have the A tier, and these teams are competitive internationally. When they show up to the Worlds or when they show up to MSI, you give them a realistic chance to win the tournament. And last but not least, we have the S tier of teams, who are the true Worlds contenders. They have incredible talent on their teams, and, you know, if everything goes their way this year, they will have a legitimate chance to win Worlds. So obviously, if you have any amount of wherewithal, you'll notice the first team is already on the screen. So first up, the worst team in the 4 major regions, in my opinion, is TSM. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things. This is actually messed up. That's not supposed to be LEC. So TSM obviously is from the LCS. I think that they're in the D tier. They're the worst team in their region, and the average age of the players on this team are over 24. Right now, if you went to go bet them on the sports book, they're at plus 6,600. So throughout this video, we're going to talk about what the futures numbers mean. So plus 6,600 means that if you bet $100, you will. If you bet $100 and TSM wins the LCS, you win $6,600 plus your $100 back. That means that they have about a 1.5% chance to win the LCS. I don't even think that's accurate. So in the top lane, we have Solo. In the jungle, we have Boogie. We have Maple in the mid lane, Neo and Chime in the bot lane. There is no redeeming quality to this team. I think that Maple could be a serviceable player on a better team. Neo has had carry upside in the past. Solo is way too old at this point. I understand that if they think the rest of the team can be solid, then you throw a player like that in there and you have a chance to be competitive. I don't really see them being competitive. Even if they make playoffs, nobody's going to be afraid of them. And I just don't have any hope in TSM. Let's try to move pretty fast through a bunch of these teams. Next up, we have Immortals. So I think that the two worst teams in the 4 major regions are from the LCS. So I think they're also in the D tier. Their best case scenario is being mid-level domestic. And if that's your best case scenario, you're a bad team. Their roster is Revenge, Kenvi, Ablaze Olive, Tactical, and I think that their support is Fleshy, but I'm not 100% sure. All of the roster information that I'm using is from Dexerto, and this is the most up-to-date information that I have. So if there's a new player, then fine, but it's going to take a ton for me to really change my opinion on this team. My problem with Immortals is that their average age is 22, which isn't very high, but none of these players really has immense upside. I think that Revenge is not a very good top laner. He's definitely in the bottom half of top laners in the LCS. And Immortals has publicly stated that they have been trying to build a team around Revenge because they believe in him. There are players who are younger than Revenge in the LCS who are better than Revenge. Why would you build around a top laner who is not even the best in his role and it does not have a huge amount to grow throughout his career? In the jungle, we have Kenvi. Kenvi had a rough year last year, but I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that his style of jungling really depends on his team being at least even. So he's probably a win more jungler, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. We see a lot of players that thrive in that kind of environment, but there are others who cannot even play it to that level. I think that Kenvi on a better team would be a good player, but he's kind of wasted here. Ablaze Olive, I like Ablaze Olive a lot. I like the style that he plays with. He seems very intelligent, and I think that he would probably be a good coach at some point, but doesn't really have the elite upside that I would want in a mid laner. I mean, it's not like he's providing you with some youth on the team either. And then you have Tactical. Tactical is a flashy player. I don't mind that he dies a lot, but this team as constructed is probably not going to do anything. In order for them to win the LCS, a lot of teams need to stop playing League of Legends. If you think that they have a chance to win, you can bet on them at plus 10,000, meaning that if you bet $100, you win 10,000 if they end up coming out on top. Next up, the 45th ranked team is SK Gaming. SK is another team that's not very good. When I originally made this video in my list, I think that I had Gilius as the jungler. Marcoon is a better player than Gilius, but it's still irrelevant. Marcoon, Certus, Exakick, and Das. Das is not good enough. Exakick, some people are excited about him. I'm not sure why. Certus is okay, but nothing special. Marcoon is a pretty good jungler. I just don't think that he is going to be enough of a difference maker on this team to kind of push them forward. And again, I swapped TSM and SK in my list, but it didn't update everything. So I think that SK was actually plus 6,600 and TSM was plus 10,000. But again, that's less than 1% chance of winning. I think that SK is the worst team in the LEC. I think that if Marcoon had an amazing season and SK Gaming ended up making some changes, maybe they can do something, but I doubt it. Let's move to the 9th ranked team in the LEC, and we have BDS. So BDS has made a bunch of changes this year. They have Adam, Shio, Nuclear Int, Crowny, and Labrov. I'm low on this team because even though Adam is an okay player, Shio, I don't think we can really expect much from him. Nuclear Int hasn't done anything to impress me so far. And then Crowny and Labrov, I think Crowny's overrated. So I would rather bet against BDS in the beginning part of this season. They're another team that's at plus 10,000, meaning that if you bet $100, you win $10,000. And that's the break-even point's roughly 1%. So if you think that there's a 1% chance that they win, go ahead, bet on it. But I'm not going to waste my time on that. Let's keep moving. The 43rd ranked team is Heretics. And Heretics is a team I think a lot of people are actually somewhat interested in, and I'm not sure why. Peter Dunn went over there, I think, and is kind of leading that organization in some capacity. I think that they're D tier, even in the best scenario. That would make them the 8th ranked team in the LEC. They're an older team too, which I think is a problem. Their odds are at plus 3,300, which is roughly 3% as a break-even point. We have Eevee in the top lane. Eevee, I get why you would want a player like Eevee on your team. He does an okay job at Worlds. He's a serviceable top laner, but he is not a difference maker in my mind. And, you know, maybe they're trying to attract the Japanese market. Maybe they're going to go after some other Japanese players. Doesn't really make much sense to me. He's, you know, in the last couple years of his career, and, you know, maybe should not even be on a team at this point because, like I said, his upside is not going to help you win a championship. Then we have Jankos. A lot of people still love Jankos. I still love Jankos. He had a pretty good year last year. He wasn't the problem really with G2, I don't think. But overall, they just, you know, weren't good enough. They made some changes. They swapped out their bot lane and got rid of Jankos. So, you know, for everybody that was telling me G2 is so good, you know, if they were so good, why would their team, you know, get rid of 3 players? In the mid lane, we have Ruby, who's interesting. I think that it's kind of getting overhyped at this point. I'm not saying that people are calling Ruby one of the best mid laners in the region. It's just I don't know why you'd go after Ruby when there are other mid laners out there, or taking a chance on an unknown. I think you probably have higher upside there. Jack Spectra, I know that he's coming into the region, but I'm not excited by him. And then Mersa is an okay support, but I don't think he's much of a difference maker. I'm not excited about Heretics. Moving on, the 42nd best team, and the first team we're going to talk about from the LCK is Fredit Brion. They're missing 2 players in this roster. That's not been updated yet. They are at plus 4,000 to win the LCK. I'd be shocked if they won the LCK. I like Morgan. I think Morgan's a good top laner. But you know, if I asked you how old is Morgan, some people are probably going to say, oh, you know, probably 23 years old. He's been around for a while, hasn't really done much, was a liability at different points. He's only 21 years old. And this is the kind of player I think makes a lot of sense for a Western team to go pick up. I don't know what he would, I don't know how he would adjust to, you know, North America or Europe, but that's the kind of player that I would want to take a chance on if I was a Western team, because he still has some room to grow, and he has had some pretty flashy performances so far. So we have Morgan in the top lane, Henna at 80 carry, and support we have Effort. I'm not a big fan of Henna or Effort, so I'm fine with not spending much time talking about Fredit Brion. Then we have Kwangdong Freaks. In the top lane we have Dudu. In the jungle we have Youngjae, Bulldog in the mid lane, and then Taeyun and Jun in the bot lane. They're at plus 6,600 to win the LCK. This is at least an interesting team. Their average age is a little higher than I would want it to be for a lot of unknown players, at least from like a professional perspective. Youngjae, Bulldog, and Taeyun may actually be able to do something. That's what I would be paying attention to. I think that Bulldog specifically is younger. And this is the kind of team that has a theoretically high upside because we don't know enough about their bad qualities. But there are a lot of teams throughout the world that are as young, if not younger, and just more talented, like proven talents. So Kwangdong, plus 6,000. I'm not interested in them for this season. In 40th, we have Nongshim. I'm going to say Dandan in the top lane. Not sure how else to pronounce that. I think they're in the D tier. We have Sylvie in the jungle. We have Fiesta, Vital, and Peter. They're the 8th best team in the LCK in my mind. They are a little bit younger than Fredit Brion, but for them to win, you know, it's plus 8,000, 1.2% to win. I'm not wasting my time on a team like Nongshim. I don't know enough about these players to like hope in the upside or have faith in the upside. Just think about their age and the amount that we know about these players, and then think about a team like, you know, T1, who we'll talk about later, and how young they are. In 39th, we have the first team from the LPL. We have LGD. So LGD has Chilizi, Meteor, Haichao. Not sure who their 80 carry is yet. And then we have Jinzhao. I don't really care who the 80 carry is. I don't think they have much of a chance to be a competitive team. Meteor is a former rookie of the split, but I don't really like any of these players very much. That's about it. The LPL does not have their odds out yet, so we can't talk about the betting implications, but I would not be interested in betting on LGD. Then in 38th, we have CLG in the LCS, and they're the first team in the C tier. So these are teams that I think have a chance to be competitive domestically, but that's really their best case scenario, I think. They brought back their entire roster. I think that's kind of a silly move. Maybe they were going after some other players and weren't able to get them, but we're at a point where it's like a ragtag group of 5 players who people want to like, but they're just not very good. The average age is 23 years old. A lot of these players have been around for a shocking amount of time. Could Luger be a good AD carry? Yes. Maybe he goes on to a better team or CLG gets new, like a new roster, but I can't really do much with this team as is. From a futures perspective, if you bet $100, you can win 5,000. I think some people out there will actually bet that number. I don't have any interest in betting on CLG. Not the kind of team that I'm going to support. Dokla in the top lane, super overrated at this point. People think that he's a good top laner. He's not. Contracts in the jungle. Contracts had a shockingly bad spring split last year, but kind of rebounded in summer a little bit. Palafox is a pretty good mid laner. Luger's a pretty good AD carry. Poom is a good enough support. People want to talk about like the cohesiveness of CLG and like, oh, they're growing and they're getting better. They're learning how to be like a team. I don't have any interest in CLG. I think that it's really like overstated how much of an impact consistency can have on a roster. If your 5 players aren't good enough, you could have them together for 10 years. It doesn't matter. You find a good young 5 players from anywhere, and they'll have a good chance to beat them if their talent is higher. So that's CLG. Moving on, we have Dignitas. So this is probably a lot lower than other people have Dignitas. A lot of people don't make global tier lists, but if they did, I'm not sure where they would throw Dig. They're an older team, and I'm not even sure I like them more than some of the other teams that are below them. It's just I think that the chance of them coming out and looking completely horrible is lower, which you kind of have to take into consideration. We have Armut in the top lane, Santorin in the jungle, Jensen in the mid lane, Spawn at AD carry, and Ignar at support. They released some kind of like roster announcement video. It was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. They're at plus 1,400 to win the split, which means they're about 6.5%. There is no way Dignitas wins the LCS, and the fact that it's at 1,400 doesn't even give you value if you bet. So if you give them $100 today, they're going to give you back 1,500 in the future. You're lighting that money on fire, and even if you win, it's not even going to feel that good because it's like, wow, I should have gotten much better odds, like 2,200, 2,400, 2,600. Because this team does not have a realistic chance of beating these other teams from the LCS who are younger and more talented. Then we have Golden Guardians, so another LCS team. They're also in the C tier, the 6th best team in the LCS. Their average age is 24 plus as well, and this is going to be something we look at around the world. Look at the average ages of the LCS teams and the very good teams from the East. Something's not lining up. So Golden Guardians at plus 7,000, they have a 1.5% chance to win. Licorice, River, Gory, Stixxay, and Huhi. I do think that Gory gives them good upside. River is a gank-heavy jungler. I don't have any problems with River specifically. I think that Huhi's a pretty good AD support, and I think that Stixxay used to be a good AD carry. But having Stixxay and Huhi, they're kind of telegraphing what they're going to do as a team. If it's a very mid-game heavy meta, maybe they can figure something out, like try to let Gory rotate in the bot lane or rotate towards dragon fights and just get them ahead by drafting powerful champions in the early and mid-game for the bot lane. But that's not going to be a consistently powerful game plan once everybody catches up. So again, I don't really have any interest in betting Golden Guardians, but at 7,000, at plus 7,000, at least you're getting some value for your money. Like I said, Dignitas was plus 1,600. I think that I would take the upside of Golden Guardians, because if Gory is very good, that's something that Dig just doesn't have access to. 35th, we're going back to Europe. We have Astralis. We have Finn in the top lane, 113 in the jungle, which I don't know much about. Dajor in the mid lane, Kabe in AD carry, and Junghoon in support. I like this team I have always been very negative towards Finn, but it's mostly because of the whole CLG fiasco. The fact that they paid like $3 million for this guy, it was a horrible deal at the time. And I'm happy that it failed for the organization. But, you know, I don't really blame Finn for it. Like, if somebody's going to pay that much money, like, cool for you. 113, I don't know much about, but I think he's a younger, like, 18-year-old jungler, which is pretty interesting. Dajor didn't really impress me last year. Kabe can do his job as the AD carry, which means Junghoon is going to be allowed to kind of, like, look for avenues to carry. I think Astralis, at an outside chance of winning, they're probably not going to win, but at plus 15,000, like, that's a wild number. I think they probably do have a between 1 to 3% chance of winning the LEC, so maybe it's worth taking a flyer on them. In order for them to really have, you know, a much higher percent chance, you're going to need them to get a different AD carry who can be more proactive with Junghoon. Junghoon and Kabe might not be a good fit with one another long term, but I think that Junghoon is a very good support, and I would be surprised if we didn't see him on a better roster in the future. So Astralis, I understand what they're trying to do, I think. I like some of their players. Finn is a serviceable top laner, but, you know, they're most likely not going to win the LEC, obviously, and that's why they're the 35th ranked team in the world. In 34th, we have Team World Elite out of the LPL. So they're the 16th best team in China. Their average age is about 22. And again, the sportsbook doesn't have odds for them. Biu and Demon, one of them will be the top laner. Then we have Hang, not sure how to pronounce that. Shanks, Hope, and Alwandi. Hope is a good AD carry, but people thought he was like a very good AD carry, and they were saying he was like a top 5 AD carry at Worlds. That was hilariously wrong. Ruler is so much better than him, so that's a great upgrade, I think, for JDG. Shanks isn't good enough. Elwandi isn't good enough. I don't know enough about Hang, and then Biu and Demon are not good enough. So if Hang and Hope are great, and everybody else is right and I'm wrong, then cool. Shanks will most likely not be a good enough mid laner in the LPL long term. I think he's just going to be stylistically limited, more of like a, you know, play for the rest of his team kind of player, which is not the upside that we want in a mid laner. Next up, we have Ultra Prime. In the top lane, we have ZS. In the jungle, we have Ning. In the mid lane, we have King. AD carry Doggo, and support Meow New. I don't know much about a lot of these players, but I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt to players like ZS, who is a highly thought of prospect. And actually, I think their support might actually be Baolan. I think Ning and Baolan are coming back. But Doggo is really the focal point of this team, and Doggo has high upside. He played well internationally, which is important for AD carries, because if they're willing to make plays and be aggressive on the international stage, that means that they have belief in themselves, and generally they have mechanical ability. Like, you don't see somebody like Stixxay go to an international competition and play like mechanically out of his mind. Somebody like Doggo, that's within the range of outcomes. If Doggo had a better supporting cast around him, I think, you know, he has the upside of being a top 10 AD carry in the East. Like, he could be on a good team. I think that ZS could be on a good team. I don't know enough about King. Ning, I'm assuming, is, you know, past his prime. There's a reason why he wasn't on one of these teams last year. And then Baolan, if it is Baolan coming back, you know, I don't have a lot of hope for them coming back, even though they have played on good teams in the past. Number 32, Invictus Gaming. So we have Nenny, Gideon, Dove, On, and Wink. Wink transitioning to support from AD carry. He played a bunch of support last split, and he did a pretty good job. On is a good enough AD carry. If this team was in like the West, if they were in the LCS or the LEC, they'd be much more competitive. They're just not good enough to really be a strong team in China. Dove transitioning from top lane to mid lane. Dove went from mid to top, and then now he's going back from top to mid. Dove and Gideon are both from Korea. Gideon is a younger jungler. Maybe he does have elite upside, but I'm not convinced yet. And then we have Nenny in the top lane, who's an okay top laner. I'm not convinced. I don't think that they are going to be very competitive against the top teams in the region. But if you told me like this team was playing against Astralis or TSM or Immortals, like I would definitely expect this team to win. Dove is a very aggressive player. Dove is very interesting. I just don't think that I would want to build a team around him. He's not young enough in my mind to justify doing that. FPX, the thing with FPX is they have a couple of good players. Xiaolao, who has shown flashes of being a good top laner. I don't know who this jungler is. Haoye, he's new. Care was okay last year, but nothing special. LWX was actually very good last year, I think. His team struggled in general, but he had a pretty good year. There were a lot of points of the year where I was surprised at how well LWX was doing. And then in support, we have Lily. Don't know enough about Lily, but LWX and Xiaolao, who should be good enough to make this team not embarrassingly bad. And Care is good enough, but I don't really have high upside. I don't think FPX has a high upside. 30th, we have Mad Lions. So I'm going to be betting against Mad Lions a decent amount, I think, this year. They are the 6th best team in the LEC in my mind. Their average age is about 23. The sportsbook has them at plus 1,000, meaning they have about 9% chance to win the league. I would not make that bet. Chasey in the top lane. Chasey is a little bit more interesting than some of the other imports that we have. I think he's probably better than Photon. But that remains to be seen. Elyoya, good jungler, if not very good jungler for the LEC. Niski, I don't like Niski. I don't think he's a good player. I think he really holds back the rest of his team. He's a bad version of Humanoid, and I think that Humanoid's a bad version of Showmaker, so I don't want that style of player to begin with. I would take it if it's Showmaker, but if it's not Showmaker, I don't want somebody trying to play like Showmaker. I just don't want that on my team. Then we have Carzzy. Carzzy was kind of scapegoated, I think, the past 2 years. I don't think he's as bad as other people do, but I don't think he has elite upside either. So this is about where they belong. They could be competitive domestically. The name recognition, if they go on a little streak, is going to be tough to kind of bet against. But at the end of the day, I think the right thing is to bet against them. And then we have Hylissang at support. I still love Hylissang. I think that he is willing to be aggressive even from a losing position. And, if you're already in a lost game, you might as well go for it. So I respect that. Let's move on. 29, the 29th best team in the world, Rare Atom. So we have Cube, Leon, Strive, Asum, and Zora or Southwind. I think Southwind was announced more recently, but I'm not sure who's going to be the starter. I think that Leon had a great year last year for his standards. I think that Rare Atom ended up being about the 8th best team in the LPL by the end of the year, but I think there were some teams that underperformed last year, so I think that Rare Atom probably takes a step back. Leon is good, Cube is okay, Strive's okay, Southwind is okay. Like I said, do I think that they're better than the Western players? A lot of them, yes, but just not good enough for the Chinese standard in my mind. Next up, we have Fnatic, and I think that people were already calling me out on previous videos about where I have Fnatic ranked this year. Fnatic is not going to be good. We have Wunder, Razork, Humanoid, Reckless, and Rux. So that futures number of plus 300 means that in order for them to break even, they need to win the region 25% of the time. No shot. They have no shot at converting at that rate. If you played this split 100 times, they're winning maybe 10% of the time. They're just not very good. And they're getting older. So now their average age is getting much older. Wunder, I'm not saying that Wunder is a bad player, but he is not going to be competitive internationally. Razork, I'm not saying he's a bad player, but he's not going to be competitive internationally. Humanoid, arguably the most overrated player in the world. Stylistically, he will show up to an international competition and show you games and put footage out there that proves that he is not an elite mid laner. And then every year we go back to a world championship and people are saying he's one of the best mid laners in the world. It's hilarious. I don't know what you people are watching, but that's that. Reckless coming back from the LFL. Could he be a league average 80 carry? Yes. Is he going to be an elite 80 carry? Probably not. Is he going to be an elite carry for the region? Maybe, probably not. But that's the problem with the LEC in general, is people have convince themselves that when they're watching the LEC, they're like watching the LPL or the LCK. These players are much worse than a lot of the players we have in the LPL and the LCK. Then we have Rux, who's like a 26-year-old support who I don't know what they're doing. Just a horrible signing in my mind. They will not fall on their face and be a complete joke. All of the narratives are going to be like, oh, Fnatic against against G2, what a great matchup. In reality, like, this team just doesn't matter. They're not going to be a factor at the World Championship. They're not going to be a factor at MSI. They might, win a game or two. They might win a knockout round match, and then maybe they, win a game off of somebody in spring playoffs or summer playoffs. But they're not going to seriously threaten anything. In order for them to do that, they probably need to get a different support. Like, if you put Junghoon on this team, now I'm interested, because Junghoon would bring an upside to this team that does not exist there with Rux. Like, Junghoon can team up with Razork, and then you have Junghoon and Razork roaming the map, and maybe they're helping create for Humanoid and Reckless, and they can, like, move advantages around the map. That would be kind of interesting, but as currently constructed, I think that they will be, at best, competitive domestically, but they don't have a shot at winning anything internationally. Definitely going to be an overrated team and a good team to bet against this year. Number 27, we have 100 Thieves, and people may think that this is too low for 100 Thieves as well, because they place a higher value on like Bjergsen and Doublelift. But overall, I do kind of think the roster's okay. Tenacity in the top lane, Closer in the jungle, Bjergsen, Doublelift, and Busio. The more I think about Tenacity and Busio with Closer, Bjergsen, and Doublelift, the more it kind of makes sense. If you think that Tenacity and Busio are very good, this is going to be a solid way to accelerate their growth in the LCS, because they're going to get consistency out of Closer. They're going to get consistency out of Bjergsen and Doublelift. And the best case scenario would be if those guys are playing a very like standard type of League of Legends, and they're saying, Busio, go make something happen. Like, Busio, come top lane, make something happen, put him on mechanically intensive champions. Like, that would be... If 100 Thieves is trying to make Tenacity and Busio the best versions of themselves, they need to play around them consistently. I'm not sure that it will end well for 100 Thieves, but it'll be interesting to see. And with that being said, that was the first team in the B tier. So I think that they could be a domestic winner. So how would they be a domestic winner? It's if Tenacity and Busio are exceptional. And this is it's not exactly what we have with Evil Geniuses, because having Inspired come over, like, Inspired was better, Vulcan was top 2 in his position, and Impact was still one of the better top laners in the LCS. We don't really get that with Closer, Bjergsen, and Doublelift. So it's very unlikely in my mind that they win, because I like the other teams much more. But they are probably the 5th best team in the region. I'm not going to bet it at plus 1100. I think all the value's been sucked out of that number. They have them projected to win 8% of the time. I would say under on that probably. But that's 27th best team in the world, 5th best team in the LCS. Let's move on. At number 26, we have DRX. So last year's world champions. I think they take a huge step back this year because all their players are gone. So could they be competitive domestically? Yes. I expect them to be. They will most likely be contending for the playoffs. If you put them into a different region, they're going to be one of the better teams, probably. Rascal's a pretty good player. Kroko has had a good year. I think he's had a good year and a half, 2 years. And he is a jungler that, do I think it's a step back from Pyosik? Yes, but Kroko is good. And a lot of people think that Kroko is better than Pyosik. I never thought that, and I still don't. But that narrative is out there. I think they also still have Juhan, so there will be some competition in the jungle probably. With Fate, we have an up-and-coming mid laner. He is a solid player. Some people were talking him up as like a very good mid laner, I think, in 2021. I don't think he's very good, but he's better than a lot of the Western mid laners. Then we have Deocdom and Beryl in the bot lane. Beryl, very good support, has been, I think he went to 3 consecutive World Finals, and he's a big part of it. His consistently, but also his player pool, or his champion pool, is like unique. Like there are so many champions that he's willing to play on the international stage. Maybe it ends up looking bad, but he'll do it because he believes in himself. Like the support Heimerdinger didn't really end up working out that great. But he looks at the game in a unique way. And then we have Diakdom. I don't blame Diakdom for Damwon kind of underperforming at Worlds. I think that he did well enough. I do prefer Damwon's roster the way that it is now, though. So I get why they moved on, but he was definitely an upgrade over Ghost. I see why they did that. They're projected to win this 1% or 10% of the time, which is plus 900. I'm not betting them at plus 900. I don't think that's a good number. Let's move on. Number 25, we have V5. So for V5, we're missing the top laner and the mid laner, but I like the other three players a decent amount. I think that Xiaolong Bao is a very good jungler. He has unfortunately been stuck behind some better junglers in the past. Specifically, I think Leon, and I think he was behind Karsa last year as well. Then we have Photic, where Photic and PP God were a great bot lane combination. Now it's going to be Photic and Zhuo. I like Photic. I think that he could be a very good 80 carry. We're not necessarily going to see that with this combination of players. If they bring in a serviceable top laner and a serviceable mid laner, then we'll have something interesting. I guess the tough thing here is that, do I really think that they have a chance to be a domestic winner? No. But do I think that they're better than, a lot of the teams in the LCS and the LEC? Yes. So I think that the rank out of 47 to number 1 makes more sense than the tier that it would slot them into. But that's kind of where I think they belong, is about number 25. Because in reality, the LPL is just a very strong region. And it's very competitive. There's a lot of parity. Number 24, we have Anyone's Legend. And I think that this is just a much better version of CLG. This is the kind of team where, give them another year, maybe they turn into something. I know a lot of people on betting Twitter like Anyone's Legend a lot. ZDZ, Xiaohao, Forge and Hong, or Forge and... All right, can't see the other one. Betty and Sword Art. I think that Sword Art will be a nice addition to this team. He was a big part of the Suning roster that made a run at Worlds. Then he went to TSM and that failed. But now he's back in the LPL. He's been back in the LPL, but now he's back as a starting player. I think that this team, they will, again, most likely not be the domestic winner, because I think that the domestic winner is already kind of figured out at this point. And we'll talk about them in the future. But number 24, I think it makes sense. If you took a team like Anyone's Legend, I think their consistency and familiarity with each other would actually, pay dividends in a region like the EC or the LCS. I'd be interested to see where they ended up in the LCK. I think they'd probably be the 5th, 6th best team in the LCK, something like that. Moving on, number 23, we go back to Europe. So we have XL. They are the 4th best team in the LEC. Their average age is over 22, but it's right around 22. I think that would probably be the median number. They're at plus 2,000 to win. I would much rather bet XL than a team like Fnatic. That puts them at under 5%. I think that they could win, between 8 to 10% of the time. This is a team that I might actually bet on. Odoamne, good top laner, not great. I don't think that he was the problem with Rogue, but, I don't think that he was going to be a long-term solution for them. They have players who can win now, and Odoamne is not helping push them over the edge. I don't think that their sub for him or their replacement for him is going to do that either. But yeah, Odoamne is pretty good still. Xerxes is shockingly young. I think he's only 22 or 23 years old, and he's been around forever. He was I think a 17 or 18-year-old player when he made his start. When he made his first start in the LEC, and then he went over to the LCS. But now he's back in the LEC. I think that he is a good player, but not a great player. Vetio and Patrick are good players. Targamas is a pretty good player. So I think, you have potentially the best mid laner, potentially the best AD carry. That's an interesting roster. And I think at plus 2,000, it makes a lot of sense to me. That's a team that I'm definitely going to consider betting. At number 22, we have Koi, formerly Rogue. We have Shigenda, Malrong, Larson, Comp, and Trimby. Shigenda made his way into the LEC a couple years ago and then left and came back. They're projected to win 30.7% of the time. That's at plus 225. I'm never going to bet that number. But I get it. Malrong is a good jungler for European standards. Larson is a good mid laner. Comp is a good AD carry. Trimby is a very good support. He's probably the best support in the LEC. At least one of them, top two. So I get why the sports books have them at plus 225, but I would never bet them at plus 225. So probably a team we'll have to bet against this year. Then we're going back to the LCK for KT. So KT, we have some very interesting names on this team. Keen, Cuz, BDD, Aiming, and Lehens. At different points in almost all these players' careers, they were thought of as top 4 or 5 in their position. Keen is one of the better top laners in the LCK and has been very consistent for a long time. Cuz, when he was coming through the T1 system, people had hopes that he was going to be a long-term solution for jungler. That didn't work out. BDD has been, thought of as one of the best 4 mid laners in the LCK for a long time. Took a step back last year. And wasn't playing at a consistently high level because his teammates were not as good. Now he's on a much better roster. Maybe his upside is still there. And then we have Aiming and Lehens, which I think should be a very good bot lane. Lehens still a very good support. Aiming still a very good AD carry. And this is the kind of team where you throw them in the LEC and they're a contender. They're like a top 2, top 3 team in Europe. So that's that. I'm not betting them at plus 1,200. You're not getting enough. Let's move on. So now we're getting into the top 20 teams in the world. Number 20, ThunderTalk Gaming. They're the 9th best team in the LPL, so obviously there are a lot of LPL teams here. But look at their average age. At 21, they are so much younger than a lot of the North American teams. You have Hoya, Beishuan, Yukal, Huanfeng, and Yao Yao or Shinlu at support. Huanfeng is one of the best AD carries in the world. Yukal made the move over from the LCK either last year or the year before, and when he was making that move, he was thought of as a high upside Korean mid laner. I don't like Yukal as much as a lot of other people do, but Beishuan is a solid jungler. Huanfeng is a very good AD carry. If you get a mediocre performance out of Yukal and a mediocre performance out of Hoya, you should have a team that will be very competitive for playoffs. And in the LPL, that's kind of an accomplishment because it's a very tough region. So I'm somewhat excited for ThunderTalk. I think that the best case scenario is it's a good meta for Huanfeng and he can kind of carry the team into the playoffs. He's a special player. He's another player that should have been snatched up by a Western team. Just throw some money at him. Number 19, we have LNG. So this is based off speculation, but I think the roster is going to be Zika, Tarzan, Scout, LP, and Hong or Shin. Their age is about 20. And I think that's without Scout. They also have Yukai, I think, as mid laners. He would be the other potential mid laner. Zika is an okay top laner. The reason why I would have this team so high is because of Tarzan and Scout. And I just believe in long-term talent. If you have those two players in your team, how bad could you really be? It's not like an upgrade over Duinby, obviously, because Scout and Duinby are relatively similar in terms of ability. But LNG, I think, again, you throw them in the West and they would have a good placement. And Zika can probably carry a lot of games for this team. But let's move on. Number 18, OMG. OMG is this high because of Cream. I love Cream. I think he is a great mid laner. He's probably a top 5 mid laner in the world from a talent perspective. He doesn't show it consistently because his team isn't great. But we have Shanji, Aki, Cream, Abel, and Jerry. When they're playing against the top teams in the LPL, it's tough for Cream to kind of play to that level because there's a talent disparity. But he is insanely good. Shanji is a good top laner. Aki is an okay jungler. I really wish that there was like a combination of a couple of these middle tier LPL teams because you'd be able to create at least one or two more very competitive, worlds contending level of teams. Cream will probably get snatched up by another team this year or the following year. He is that good. At number 17, we have Sandbox. And this is arguably the most interesting team in the world, in my mind. Their talent level, from like a pedigree perspective, is just insanely high. Birdall, Willer, and Closer are all very good players that are under 20. Birdall, I think, is still only 18 and a half or 19 years old. He was going to be a long-term solution in top lane for Damwon, but his playstyle really didn't fit. I think it didn't really fit for Gen.G, and then it really didn't fit for Damwon. But if you get a team that can allow Birdall to play like a high volatility top lane style, and like, you know, have Willer and Closer play to the heights that they've shown in their career, I think that you have a very interesting team. Willer was good on Homalife when Homalife had Chovy and Deft, but then it kind of like all fell apart. And then he like stopped playing as much, and Homalife really didn't have a good year last year. I'm not sure how that all worked out. I'm not sure why Willer didn't get more playing time. Closer was thought of as the potential replacement for Faker. You know who else was a potential replacement for Faker? Zika. So when you have a player like Closer, a player like Zika, they have immense upside, and you know that's exciting. Envy and Kale, I'm not sure if I really believe in their talent as a bot lane, but if the volatility is going to come from the top half of the map, then all they have to do is listen to the shot calling and rotate when it's their time to rotate to like Rift Herald and Baron fights and stuff like that. I think at plus 2200, that's a very interesting number for me. I think I might have to take a shot at plus 2200 on Sandbox. So watch out for them. They're one of the teams I'll be paying the most attention to. And I normally hate Sandbox because they gave Yamato Cannon a job. 16th, we have G2. So G2, I think, in a best case scenario, they will make it into the knockout stages at Worlds, which will almost necessarily make them competitive internationally, but I don't think they have a realistic chance at winning the Worlds Championship. Their age is only getting higher. Yike coming in is somewhat interesting, but at plus 225, I really don't see myself betting this number. Thinking that they have a 30% chance to win, I'm not convinced. Broken Blade is a good but not great top laner. I think that the whole top father thing is like a very funny marketing thing, but it's kind of overstated how like good he is compared to Eastern top laners. Yike, you can do it in EU Masters. Let's see you do it in the LEC, and if he can, then fine. Like their team will be relatively consistent because you still have Caps, Hansama coming back from a down year in North America, and then we have Mickey. Like it's tough to see the LEC producing like a super good team because a lot of these players are just known quantities where their upside is just not going to be as strong as some of these Korean and Chinese teams. So I don't really love their upside, but I think that we will see them at Worlds when it is all said and done. Next up, we have Team Liquid. So Team Liquid is at plus 200. That's a 33% chance to win, and I have them as the 4th ranked team, which is pretty funny. Summit is a good top laner. I think that what Cloud9 did to him was like a joke. I get he didn't have a good playoffs, but to think that, they had to get rid of him, just kind of insane. And then he went over to FPX and he had a pretty good time with FPX. So, I believe in Summit to some extent. Pyosik, I love Pyosik. Some people want to say that he is bad because of his Worlds performance, even though that he was on like the World Championship winning team. Some people were saying that they carried him over the finish line. But Pyosik is just a very high volatility jungler. You can't really be too upset about that. I love Pyosik. I think it's a very interesting move for him to make. I love Core JJ, obviously, but Harry and Yun, I don't know enough about them. The best case scenario, yeah, I could see why it's plus 200, but because of the uncertainty around Harry and Yun and the power of the 3 other teams in the LCS, I'm having a tough time wanting to bet that number or get them any higher in the rankings. Let's move on. In 14th, we have Cloud9. I would rather bet on Cloud9 than Team Liquid. We have Fudge, Blabber, Diplex, Berserker, and Sven. In Berserker, you have potentially the best player in the LCS. Fudge, again, potentially one of the best players in the LCS. Blabber, one of the best players in the LCS. even if Diplex is the definition of mediocre and Sven, doesn't get much better as a support, you still have a good team that will be competitive, probably make it to Worlds. And then it's really, what can they get out of Fudge, Blabber, and Berserker? I think Berserker, his upside is very interesting. There's still all these stories coming out about, T1 and Gumayusi thinking that Berserker was an actual threat to break into that starting AD carry position. It's going to be tough to shake that from a talent evaluation. So yeah, I think that Cloud9 has one of the highest ceilings in the LCS. And if it weren't for these other two teams, you could see them being like a dominant team in the LCS in previous years. But there are better teams in the LCS right now. Then we have Vitality. I think that Vitality is the best team in Europe. Photon, Bo, Perks, Neon, and Kaiser. The reason I think that this is the best team in the LEC is because of Bo. Bo got in trouble in the LPL for match fixing. That's bad. And he's still a young person. Maybe it's a mistake that he learned from. But his upside, his potential, like in that carry meta that we saw in like 2020 and 2021, he was arguably, he had some of the best performances in that carry jungle meta out of anybody in the world. And that's kind of saying something. It really looked like they had a long-term solution in the jungle at FPX. But again, they had the problems with the potential match fixing. So Photon, I'm really not that excited about Photon. I think that he's going to be like not much of a difference maker in the top lane. And I could be wrong about that. I'm just not super afraid of Photon. Then we have Bo in the jungle, who I think that he has the upside to be not only the best jungler in the LEC, but one of the best junglers in the world. Then we have Perks. I'm like a huge Perks fan. I think that he, doesn't always have consistency. Sometimes his performances are below average for his standard. But at the end of the day, in the playoffs, when you need a mid laner, I'd rather have him than Humanoid. So he's still up there. Neon had a good year last year. Will he have a much better year than last year? I don't really think so. Carzzy was not the answer for a team with Perks. You really need a different style of player. So hopefully Neon and Kaiser can make sense of it in the bot lane. But again, at plus 650, I have no interest in betting Vitality at plus 650. If I bet a team from the LEC, it'll most likely be XL. Moving on. Back to the LPL. So in the LPL, we have RNG. When RNG got Breathe, I thought they were going to be the best team in the world. It didn't work out for them. I'm not sure who their mid laner is going to be at this point, but we have Breathe, Wei, Gala, and Ming. That roster, as long as you get an average mid laner, should be very good. I do think that Gala's a little overrated, but still, like, he's good enough to be on a world's contending team. Breathe is one of the best top laners in the world. Wei is not that good, but you don't need to be that good as long as this mid laner that they bring in is at least average. If it's an average mid laner, then you have 3 above average players probably, and that's good enough. I'm very interested to see who they pick up. But even without a mid laner, I'm willing to put them up that high. Is that a little crazy? Probably, but that's what happens when you have one of the best top laners in the world. Number 11, we have Evil Geniuses. And I think that EG with Someday and FBI, I don't think that their ceiling is as high as what they had with when Danny was in the roster. I think that Danny's ceiling is much higher than FBI's, but FBI is much more consistent, and I don't think that the team is as likely to fall into a lot of the draft traps that happened last year because Rigby is gone. Rigby, bad coach. I don't understand why people were so heartbroken that he was leaving. Like, I think he has to do the Korean military service stuff, which is totally fine. I respect it. Go do what you got to do. But for us to sit here and pretend like he was a good coach in the LCS, just kind of a joke to me. Notice how, nobody really knew much about Rigby or cared about Rigby until he had inspired JoJo Pyun Danny. Like, did he create those players? No. Did he help them? Probably a little bit, but they were still very talented players before they ever, met the guy. So Inspired is the best jungler in the LCS. I do think that he's better than Piosik. But again, at that point, you're kind of splitting hairs, I guess. I love Inspired, though. I think that he has the mentality that I want in a player. Jojo Pyun, one of the youngest mid laners in the 4 major regions. I think that his upside is immense. Hopefully, Danny can come back at some point this year or next year. But stepping away from the game, obviously a very sad situation. I still don't understand what happened. Maybe he was feeling like depressive or had some kind of bad mental health stuff going on. Horrible situation. My heart breaks for the guy. I hope he comes back to professional League of Legends. He seemed to be like coming into his own and being more comfortable with the spotlight. Like, I liked how he was kind of saying that they were going to sweep the team in the finals. He has that insane mechanical upside. He's willing to take risks. That's what I want in a player. So, if nothing ever comes from that, it'll be a little sad, but I think that it was pretty clear that Danny's upside was insane. So with this roster having Impact leave, bringing in Someday, they should be at about the same level. And then FBI and Danny, I think that FBI is more consistent than Danny, but doesn't have the upside. So I still think that this team is, arguably a top 10 team in the world. And they would have been a top 10 team in the world if the number 10 team didn't put together this roster. So FlyQuest is kind of shocking to me how this all played out. If you told me that FlyQuest would get Prince, I would have slapped you in the face. I mean, they get bought out by like a super rich family from Florida. They bring in Impact, who's still a good top laner. Not great, but is a good top laner. He doesn't need to be a difference maker. He doesn't need to be the most important player on the team. He's arguably the 4th or 5th most important player on this roster. Spica, arguably the best North American jungler in the league. Then we have Vikla. Vikla is a good player, not great. I think that's kind of where it can go wrong for FlyQuest, but at the same time, it is North America, so the chances of Vikla completely failing seems low to me. Then we have Prince, who I think his performance last summer was kind of insane. He is the archetype of player that I want. I honestly do think that Danny is better than him. But again, Danny's not playing right now, so it's tough to say what that would look like. I wish we could see that matchup. That would be such a fun matchup to watch. And at the end of the day, we have to remember a lot of the time, AD carries are a product of their environment. A lot of times they're not creating the situation that allows them to carry a game, but they have to farm up and get ready to take advantage of that opportunity. So if the team can kind of like put it on a plate for them, they can finish it up. It reminds me of like in soccer, like right now, Erling Haaland is like insane. Like, he scores so many goals. Some of the goals that he scores are because he's absolutely insane. Other goals that he scores are because like Kevin De Bruyne has like an amazing pass, or like Man City is just much better than a lot of other teams. Like, a lot of those goals, I'm not going to give him much credit for. Like, not anybody, but most professional strikers could finish it. But there are some special points or special goals that he scores that other people just can't do. So I think in my mind, like, players like Ruler, Viper, they're at the top. And then you have somebody like Prince where he's almost as good as them, but they're still better than him. But again, I think that it's very exciting that FlyQuest has this kind of roster. I hope it succeeds. They brought in Song as well for their coach. So at plus 250, again, I can't bet on them at plus 250. I don't think that really makes sense for me. But that number might be a little low. Like, maybe it should be like plus 150. Because they are a very good team. But, I'd rather have EG at 400 than FlyQuest at 250. But I'm not betting on either one of those. But this is the top 10. So let's get to number 9. EDG. So we have Ale, Jai or Junja, Fofo, Leave, and Mako. Leave coming into this roster with Viper leaving it tells me that they knew Viper would potentially leave, and this was going to be their response. And that means that we should have a lot of confidence in Leave's ability. Fofo, I used to hate Fofo. There were some moments last year where Fofo looked very good, which was kind of surprising to me, but I can't shake that feeling at this point. Ale, coming out of Worlds last year, people thought that he was going to be like one of the best top laners in the world. And, I kind of saw through that. He was a good top laner, but a lot of his performances at Worlds were because of the competition he was playing against when he was on LNG. But now, with this roster, I think it's a pretty good roster. You have a very solid starting lineup. I see them finishing top 5 for sure. And it sucks because that's only quarterfinals. If they end the quarterfinals, it's going to feel like a failure, and they're not going to make it to Worlds. But they're one of the best teams in the world, so it's kind of an unfortunate situation for a team like EDG. But them's the breaks. Let's go to the 8th best team, and we have BLG. This is the team that I want to bet on. I want to find a sportsbook that will let me bet on the World Championship tomorrow. I think that Bin is a very good top laner. I know it didn't work out on RNG, but he's still a very good top laner. Shun is an elite jungler. Definitely a top 10 jungler in the world in my mind. Yagao is not a great mid laner, but he has been on good teams before, and he knows how to perform at the highest levels in China, which is very important. He has been a part of championship winning teams. You have to give some respect to that. I don't think that he's elite. I don't think that he is the difference maker, but he can be a glue guy for a very good team. And then we have the star of the team, which is Elk. I think that Elk is one of the most underrated AD carries in the world. And I think that's why this team has such immense upside. If you take a look back at the World Elite team that had Breathe, Beishang, Elk, that team was wild. They just had a very bad, in my opinion, mid laner situation. They had a very bad mid lane situation. A lot of different mid laners they had to kind of rotate through because nobody was good enough. If they had an elite mid laner at that point in time, they had a legitimate chance in my mind of winning Worlds, but that didn't work out. But you can see the staying power of these players. Actually, it was Zhao Meng and Missing back then. So Missing, another player who's on a top team at this point in time. But this is the team that I want to see where the sportsbook posts that line at once all these rosters get figured out. I think that BLG has very high upside. The one concern is that BLG has consistently had bad coaching and drafting, so I'm not sure if that has changed. That's the one hesitancy I have. Let's move on. Number 7, and the first S-tier team is Gen G. So we have Doran, Peanut, Chovy, Pays, and Delight, plus 600, 14% chance to, or the break-even point is 14%. So Doran, one of the better top laners, but not an elite carry top laner. Peanut is a very good jungler. Chovy, one of the best mid laners in the world. Some people are going to start souring on Chovy, but he's still only 21 or 22, and he's not going anywhere. He's one of the best mid laners, period. Pays, I don't know anything about Pays. Delight, I think it was Henna and Delight were the bot lane combo for one of the bottom teams in the LCK, but he's still a very young player. So Doran and Peanut a little bit older, Chovy, Pays, and Delight a little bit younger. That's the real volatile part of the team. Peanut can play both sides. He kind of created the Poppy situation we had last year where it was super annoying. And it's because even though he used to be a very highly mechanically gifted carry style jungler, he doesn't need to play that way to help a team. I'm not convinced that him and Chovy are a great combination, but they're still one of the best teams in the world. I have them at number 4 in the LCK and number 7 in the world. At number 6, we have Hanwha Life. And Hanwha Life, this is a great roster. Kingen, Klid, Zika, Viper, Life. If they had almost any other jungler, they would arguably be the best team in the world. Zika and Viper together on the same team is awesome. The only way this team fails is if Life or Klid is just complete trash, but I don't see that happening. I think that Klid could be a very good fit for this team. He's not going to be asked to carry the team. But I think that's kind of what made Zika so good at the World Championship, was Piosic was taking on so much attention. With a jungler like Klid, there's going to be more of a focus on Zika because now people understand how good he is. I've been talking up Zika for the past 2 years, and I'm glad that it resulted in a World Championship, and I made money off of it because now that value is gone. Like I'm not I'm not going to have some kind of competitive edge in that situation betting on his upside. Moving on, the top 5 teams in the world. At number 5, we have Top Esports. So we have Wayward, Tian, Rookie, Jackie Love, and Mark. So you have the same team, you swap out Knight, you put in Rookie. That's a really good roster. I don't think that Rookie is as good as Knight. I think last season Rookie was probably playing at a higher level than Knight. I think Knight was probably frustrated at Worlds because Wayward, Tian, Jackie Love, and Mark did not play to his level. Knight is going to be a player that, in order for him to cement his legacy, he probably needs to make it to a World Finals, and be performing at a Zika-esque level to be remembered as highly as he should be. But he is one of the best top laners in the world. Now, not sure I'm talking about him right now. Not sure why I'm talking about him right now because I will have to talk about him in the future. But swapping out Rookie and Knight, we should get a pretty good performance out of Top Esports this year. I have them as the 3rd best team in the LPL. Very excited for them. They are also in the S tier, but S-. I think that they have more question marks than some of the other teams we're about to talk about. At number 4, we have Weibo Gaming. I love Weibo Gaming. I love the Shy. I like Karsa. Xiaohu, very good. Light and Crisp, very good players. It's a very exciting team. The volatility coming out of the top lane is going to be somewhat frustrating to watch. Even though all these players have been around for 5, 6, 7 years, they're all about 23, 24 years old. It's a little bit older than I would want in general, but I think that when we look at the rest of the teams around the world, there are some big question marks on a lot of the rosters. This one does not have a question mark. Some people will say that the Shy should be a question mark, but you show me a top laner that has, as much of an impact on his team's ability to win a match, that has more of an impact than the Shy. That player doesn't exist. Maybe Breathe could be at that level in terms of volatility, but I don't think that anyone's as insane as the Shy, where he wants to do that in every single game. So I'll be interested to see how this kind of plays out for Weibo Gaming. I love Weibo Gaming in general. I think that this should be a very interesting team to watch. Xiaohu specifically said that the only top laners that he would let play top lane instead of him, because he's made that role swap before, he wanted either the Shy or Breathe or Bin, I think. I think those were the only 3 top laners that he would allow someone else to play the role instead of himself, because now carry top lane is very impactful, and has been for about 1.5 years, 2 years. I love the Shy. One of the best players in the world. One of the most fun players to watch in the world. Don't have a futures bet for them, but you're probably not going to be able to bet on them at a reasonable number. So let's move on. Number 3, team in the world, and we have T1. And this might surprise some people. This is not right. So it's not T1. I guess we can... So I think the 3rd best team in the world is T1. It's showing me a different roster right now, but obviously we have Zeus, Owner, Faker, Gumayusi, and Keria as the bot lane. They're at plus 300 to win, which is winning about 25% of the time. I love T1. I love their roster. Just because I don't have them as number 1 doesn't mean I don't think that they have a very good chance of winning the World Championship. They're one of the 3 teams that I think have no question marks on their team. We will see them at the World Championship, and they will make it to the knockout round. That's almost a given. The season is really about, how many different kind of styles can they show, how many different players can carry on their team. It's tough to see a scenario where T1, isn't one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the world. I don't really have to explain that to you. If you're watching this video and watch this entire thing, you understand why that's the case. Number 2, we have Damwon Gaming, and I think that Damwon will be the best team in the LCK. So just for sake of myself, I'm going to go back to this to look at the roster. So for Damwon, we have Kana, Canyon, Showmaker, Deft, Kellen. A lot of people that watch my videos question some of my talent evaluation. Damwon Gaming, one of the best teams in the world, looks at a player like Kana and sees one of the best top laners in the world. I look at a player like Kana, I see one of the best top laners in the world. He had a bad year because his team was bad. His numbers were bad because his team was bad. Kana is one of the most talented players in the world, one of the best top laners in the world. Kana, Canyon, Showmaker, that's an insane top half of the map. Kana, Canyon, Showmaker is better than King and Pyosik and Zika, and we saw Deft on that level of a team perform at a very high level. Deft will not be asked to carry this team, and that's okay. He can get into the high stress environment of a World Finals and play to that level without being the focal point of the team. That's exactly the kind of AD carry you want on a team with Showmaker. I think that, a player like Prince could have worked. I think Ruler, Viper could have worked. I think that somebody like Elk could have worked. Gumayusi could have worked. But you need to have a very good AD carry. I think a lot of those AD carries are better than Deft at this point in his career. But as a utility AD carry, there are not many better options out there than Deft. And I like this roster a lot. I hope that Showmaker can get his team back into the finals. Damwon with Canyon and Showmaker is a ridiculous core, and this is why it's so important to have good young talent. Damwon went to back-to-back world championships, world finals. They won one of them. It's a ridiculous. Wait, did they win or did they lose both? It's just a ridiculous team. Canyon and Showmaker, two of the best players in the world, and they're not stopping anytime soon, and that's really why I have a problem with the LCS. It's because what do you think is going to happen with Showmaker? Do you think Showmaker is going to stop being good? The answer is obviously no. He's going to be good for his entire career. So then we have Deft, and then we have Kellen. Kellen's good enough. I don't think that Kellen is like a great player, but that's that. Sorry. And then last but not least, we have the best team in the world, and it's obvious the best team in the world is JDG. This is not debatable. I don't think that 369 is one of the best top laners in the world, but apparently a lot of you do. So you have one of the best top laners in the world. You have Kanavi, who is one of the best junglers, probably the best jungler in the world. Then you have Knight, who is probably he is definitely top 3. He's probably the second best mid laner in the world. We have Ruler. Ruler is inarguably one of the 2 or 3 best AD carries of all time. So just coming back again, he will be one of the best AD carries in the world. There's no reason to think that he's going to fall off a cliff. And then we have Missing. And again, I don't think that Missing is one of the best supports in the world, but all you do. So if you all think that 369 and Missing are some of the best players in the world, then Kanavi, Knight, and Ruler are definitely some of the best players in the world. They have a top 5 player at every position, according to the public. They have to be the number 1 team. I don't know what number I'd have to get this at to justify betting it. It'll be pretty impossible to bet on them to win the world championship, because their odds are going to be like, plus 250 going into the tournament a couple months from now. So like maybe if I found a book where I could bet on them to win the world championship today and like let it hang out there for a year, maybe something like that works. But that's basically it. So we got through all 47 teams. Not sure how long that took. Probably a lot of time. I really don't think it's arguable at this point. JDG is the best team in the world. So yeah, that's basically it. This is, I think, what a global tier list would look like with like an with like the team logos and everything. It's the LCS is kind of off to the side. So maybe I'll do that in a separate video or like post that on Twitter or something like that. But this is just a good starting point, I think, for the season. Teams that I'm interested to bet on would be XL. I think XL makes a lot of sense. I think that Sandbox, XL and Sandbox are probably the two teams I'm the most excited about. So XL, Sandbox, and BLG. Those are my three teams. I'm going on record. Those are the teams that I want to support the most, that are like kind of dark horses. Evil Geniuses, I love Evil Geniuses, obviously. For the LCS, not really sure if I can kind of support any of the other LCS teams. I'm not getting long enough odds. But those three teams are very interesting. But that's basically it. That's all I got for today. Thanks for watching. And I'll talk to you later.